I'm with Jonathan Feldstein, the president of Genesis 123. Now, Jonathan, what is Genesis 123?
So the Genesis 123 Foundation is a nonprofit that strives to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new and unique and meaningful. In other words, we're creating new programs that connect people together that aren't currently being done, and we don't want to compete with others. We want to add programs and add mechanisms of interaction so that people can find meaningful ways to relate and build bridges and underscore that which we have in common between Jews and Christians, God of Israel and the land and the people of Israel.
When did you start the organization, and why did you start it?
So the organization is 2 years old, and we started it because we perceived, me and members of my board, that there's a void, that many people are out there in this space building bridges and running events and certainly doing fundraising, but not thinking creatively about ways that were missing. We wanted to fill the gap. We wanted to find new ways to create people, to create connections with people, and to do so with integrity, because I'm sad to say, and you probably know this and listeners know this, far too many pro-Israel organizations and or ministries will use a Christian market as a way to objectify Christians as what I term a faith-based ATM, to try to get money out, but not really make relationships and build connections on a long-term basis. And we want to change that model. We want to add integrity. We don't want everything to always be about money. We want to be about really building genuine, solid, lasting bridges and relationships.
Is the Jewish-Christian relationship seem to have new vision at the moment?
That's an excellent question. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a new vision, but I think that there's a constant growing wind in the sail of Jewish-Christian relations as more Christians realize that they have to understand that Christianity comes from Judaism, and if you don't have a full understanding of what Judaism is, you don't necessarily have a full understanding of your own faith, and the respect and understanding that God made his covenant and promises through Abraham and the Jewish people in the Old Testament. And from the Jewish side, I think the Jews are awakening in a new era where we're now 72 years into the state of Israel, not existing in fear at the will of kind or less than kind people in the diaspora. And Jews understand that we have more in common with Christians than we have that divides us, albeit the things that divide us are substantial theologically, but we need to come together, and I see that growing on a consistent basis.
Is it persecution? Do you think that's bringing us together?
There's definitely an element of persecution that brings us together. You're right, because probably the two most persecuted faiths in the world are Jews and Christians. Now, we are a people in addition to being a faith, but there's no question about it. And I think it's a very good question. And I think it's really important because one of the projects that we launched as part of the Genesis 123 Foundation recently was to get Jews and Christians to sign a petition against the Turks taking over a former cathedral and turning it into a mosque, which is something that Jews and Christians should be scared of, because the Turks have their goals and eyes set on the Temple Mount and the mosques that are there and taking over that. So persecution, maybe it's because we're the only two faiths that have a similar covenantal relationship with God, for whatever the reason, but definitely the fact that we are persecuted, we're in the same corner, we're on the same team. Sometimes I say we're on the opposite sides of the same coin, and sometimes we're on the same side of the coin.
Tell us a little bit more about the programs that you run with Genesis 123.
Sure. So we launched a program earlier this year called Verses for Zion. And Verses for Zion, again, unique way to connect children, Christian children, with Israel in a way that's biblical and age appropriate. And what we've done on versesforzion.com is provide a list of 72 biblical verses, no text, just the actual reference to the verse, and kids can come on and sign up and study those verses at their own pace with their parents, with their grandparents, with their siblings or friends or pastors in church, whatever it may be, and have a much deeper appreciation for the significance of Israel biblically. We've deliberately, which is unique for me as an Orthodox Jew, we've deliberately included verses from the New Testament because that's the Christian Bible, and it's important and I think imperative that Christians should be able to understand that if it says it talks about Israel and the Jewish people in the Old Testament, that's understood. But if it talks about Israel and the Jewish people in the New Testament, in the Gospels, written by 4 Jewish men about Jewish life in the first century, I think that underscores to Christians even all the more significance. So Verses for Zion is to connect children with Israel. We have a new webinar series called Inspiration from Zion, which is to connect broadly. We had a webinar yesterday evening. We had people from 14 countries, which is so amazing, going as far east as New Zealand and Australia, and even with countries in Asia with which we don't have diplomatic relationship, Malaysia and Pakistan, Christians dying to come on and connect with us. We have a vision for doing a speakers bureau, which will be virtually initially, but eventually in person again when we're not worried about the risks of the pandemic. We eventually plan to connect people through golf. Again, a unique opportunity in people who golf. Now let's bridge golf with connections with Israel in ways that are meaningful. And our flagship program, there are many more, but the flagship program that we spent so much time building over the last 2 years is called Run for Zion, and that's the first ever Christian-oriented program built around the Jerusalem Marathon. Until 10 days before the marathon this year, we were on par for a tremendous, tremendous success, and then unfortunately the marathon was canceled and we had to cancel our program.
The coronavirus has changed everything.
Indeed.
Is this an opportunity for people from abroad to connect with the land of Israel through the marathon?
Yeah, definitely. And I say marathon, I call that the M word because by full disclosure, I'm not a runner. And even to walk, I have a bad knee and a bad back. And even to walk 10 kilometers would be painful for me. So we want to connect people, whether they're serious marathon runners and want to run 26.2 miles or 13.1 miles, or run or walk 5 or 10 kilometers that are all segments of the organized race. It's the largest marathon that we have in Israel annually, in arguably the most significant city for Jews and Christians, of course, but I would say in the world. It's the most historic place that you'll find the opportunity to run. But I always say, come and participate with us, even if you're not a runner or walker like myself, because any serious marathon needs to have people on the sidelines cheering as part of that experience. But it's not just a tourist experience where we dump them on a Friday morning and say, go run and come back to your hotel and have a good weekend. We provide a full interactive 5-day touring and service project. We call it a service and pilgrimage experience where people can volunteer with organizations. We offer the opportunity for people to raise money for the organizations that we fund. We don't obligate that. That's really important to me. How one blesses Israel is a personal thing between them and God, I believe, because God has decreed that as an obligation and he decides on what the blessing is in return. We wanted to offer this as an opportunity, but we do so also in a really interesting and unique way, because when God says in Genesis 12:3, let me rewind. God does not say in Genesis 12:3, bless Israel, I am the Lord your God. He says, bless Israel and I will bless you. That means you get something. That means he's making you a promise. So we came along with that promise, with that model and formula, and said, great, if you want to join us and raise some money to bless Israel, fantastic. Depending on how much you raise, we're going to subsidize your trip to Israel so it can even possibly be free, which is really a material, substantial blessing that many people can receive.
So you got many, many people coming from all around the world to Israel to run. What do they get to see when they run for Zion?
So we do touring in and around Jerusalem. We go and visit, obviously, historic and religious sites by bus, by foot, but we also interact with the nonprofit organizations that we fund. So in some cases, like in a food pantry, people have an opportunity to pack food packages, to serve food to people who are poor and indigent or don't have enough money or need to take food home. And that's a very direct hands-on experience. For instance, we fund a project that helps women in Israel make a positive choice not to terminate a pregnancy. There's not a hands-on experience for that. That would be terribly inappropriate. But we do offer opportunities for briefings, for an understanding how here in Israel, why the issue of protecting unborn babies, why providing civilian support for communities in the periphery, or social welfare for soldiers who put their lives on the line, or simply planting trees to grow and have the land prosper. All of these things and more are elements that we involve in the 5-day program. We encourage people to partner with us. Ministries can bring their own teams along and partner and customize their program, but we want to have a personal hands-on experience, not just a tour where someone gets on and off a bus.
So Christians and churches can actually come here and join and be part of you.
They can join us as a partnering ministry and promote it within their churches, and even if they only bring 5 people as part of their own church, what they benefit from is they don't have to fill up a whole bus and make it cost effective on their own because they're part of a larger group. But if they bring, obviously the more people they bring, the more cost effective it is, and that's wonderful, and we want to facilitate that and celebrate it. But we very much believe in the concept of partnership, that everything should be a win-win. There are circumstances in life where things are not a win-win, where there's a winner and a loser. But I don't believe that that's our model here. Our model is, it's that same formula. God promises to bless those who bless Israel. I believe that everything that we do should have a win. Obviously, that we're fulfilling our goals to build bridges, but that it's a blessing to Israel and it's a blessing to each individual participant and any ministry that partners with us.
And this really does bless Israel as well, doesn't it?
Big time. Yeah, this year we were on par to raise $100,000 that we were going to be dividing up among various organizations here. Unfortunately, that fell apart. We have obligations that we have all the money in the bank still, because we still are not sure yet how much I have as an obligation. Many people in the tourism business have said, okay, you paid your trip, the trip was canceled, deal with your insurance or whatever it may be. In fact, with us, the opposite. People are getting their money back. And not only that, for those people who raised enough money to hit those benchmarks where they would get subsidies, I'm reserving that money in the bank so that the subsidy will be good for next year, 2021, or more likely 2022. So yeah, it's a tremendous blessing. It's bringing people here, it's engaging them in the land, it's blessing the organizations and the people who are helped by the organizations, and no less important than all of that, it's opening the eyes of the participants as runners, walkers, or, well, I alluded to before, golfers, but have a unique experience in Israel through the prism of something that no one's ever done before.
What do people say when they've run Jerusalem?
Oh, there was a funny joke. I did an interview the other day, and someone said, if you like running uphill, this is going to be your most favorite marathon. The truth is, with Jerusalem, for every uphill, there's a downhill. It happens to be a very hilly and difficult course. Comparatively, it's not flat, although it is great because of the elevation. It's very dry as well, so you're not running in lots of humidity. But for serious runners, I tell people you're not going to come to Israel to get your best time in a marathon. There are great runners internationally who compete here and do come in with significant low times, but for a non-professional, this is going to be an experience that if only is unique because you're going to be distracted by the tremendous views and the tremendous significance of those views, knowing that every kilometer you've run, there's thousands of years of history to your right and left.
Why is it important for Christians to fellowship with Jews?
I think it's important for Christians to fellowship with Jews and Jews to fellowship with Christians because we serve the same God, and He's the only God. He's the Creator. He made the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and through that covenant we have the Jewish people, and through the Jewish people we have Christians and Christianity. And I think that's critical for Christians to understand. I think also because we're the only people who serve the Creator, that we need to be on the same side, on the same team, as often as not. And by the way, and where we differ, have respectful, wonderful, challenging dialogues that open our eyes to one another, not in a way that is threatening or off-putting, but that adds to our respective faiths in many ways. And there are a number of people who say this, it's not my line. Jews can exist very well without Christians, but Christianity cannot exist without Judaism. And it's not for me as an Orthodox Jew to say how a Christian should be or what a Christian needs to understand, but I do believe that a Christian's faith is that many, many more dimensions are added to a Christian's faith by understanding Jewish history, Jewish tradition, and how from that when Jesus was preaching, He's preaching Torah. He's preaching the Old Testament. That was the scripture that He read and studied, and Christians I think, need to understand that in order to have a much wider, multi-dimensional approach to their own faith.
Now you're originally from America. Why did you make Aliyah to Israel?
Why did I make Aliyah? My father was born here. He was actually born in what was then called Palestine, so I refer myself as a Palestinian. Then, of course, in the 1930s, anyone who was a Jew in Palestine was referred to as a Palestinian. When I came here for my very first trip, and as an adolescent, I perceived it was a place that I wanted to live. I was a kid myself, and somehow God put on my heart that this is a better place to raise children than where I was living and grew up in America, and I wanted to raise my children here, which is really profound for a 15-year-old kid to have that realization. My father gave me a name he could never pronounce because he always had an accent until the day he died, so whether he was telling me to do my homework or rake the leaves in the front lawn or take out the garbage or anything else, he always called me Jonathan. And that always gave me not just a Jewish, but an Israeli approach. And I've always wanted to be here since then. And we wanted to be able to not have a 50, this is an American football analogy, a 50-yard line seat or a center court seat, to borrow something more universal. We wanted to be players. We wanted to be on the field. And it's been such a blessing. We made Aliyah 16 years ago this month with 5 kids. Our 6th was born here in Jerusalem 15 years ago. We now have a grandchild who's nearly 2 years old, and living here is just a tremendous blessing. We're part of the action, for the good and for the bad.
And what's your prayer finally for Genesis 1-2-3?
The prayer for Genesis 1-2-3 is that we'll get literally millions of Christians joining us and standing with us and partnering with us in ways that we've already perceived, and working with us in ways that we had not perceived, and building bridges that are 2 ways, that are lasting and strong, and that we are able to take the concept of building bridges to first and foremost exalt God in all of our works together, and enhance our own individual lives and faiths.
And what's your website for people who'd like to know more? Perhaps come and run next year, if we can run.
Yeah, by all means. So the website for the Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation is genesis123.co. We haven't updated the Run for Zion website because there's no need right now, but it's a very nice site. That's runforzion.com. For people with children or grandchildren, they're invited to go to versesforzion.com. But all of that information and links to those sites are housed at genesis123.co.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you.